1945. The world was rising from the ashes of war. Cities were destroyed, Europe was in ruins, millions of people had lost everything. But here's the strange part. Even in the middle of that chaos, people still trusted one thing: gold. Because throughout history, humanity kept learning the same lesson over and over again. Systems collapse, currencies change, empires disappear. But when crisis begins, people return to gold. And it's not just investors. States do it too. Banks do it too. Even warring empires do it. So why? Why have humans returned to the same metal during every major crisis for thousands of years? The answer is hidden more in psychology than economics. This is economic legacy, where history meets financial power. Because gold is not just a precious metal. It is the physical form of trust. Today, you look at the money in your pocket and assume it has value. But the truth is, this paper itself is worthless. The only reason it has value is because people believe in it. The dollar is valuable because people believe it will still be valuable tomorrow. Banks function because people believe the system will survive. Economies grow because society maintains trust. But once a crisis begins, everything changes. Because fear makes humans behave instinctively, not rationally. And history has shown this again and again. In the final years of the Roman Empire, the state faced a massive problem. Wars were expensive. The army kept growing. Taxes were no longer enough. So Rome found a solution: creating more money. But here's the interesting detail. Rome did not print paper money like modern governments. Instead, they reduced the actual silver content inside their coins. The currency looked the same, but it was secretly becoming less valuable. At first, people didn't notice, but then market prices began rising. Soldiers demanded higher pay. Trade became unstable, and eventually people stopped trusting Roman currency. That was the moment something important happened. People stopped storing wealth in paper promises and began storing it in real assets, gold. Because Rome could manipulate its currency, but it could not manipulate gold itself. And this pattern has repeated throughout history. Governments create money to save the system. People protect value instead of the system itself. Centuries later, the same thing happened again. 1923. Germany, perhaps one of the most terrifying economic collapses in history. Hyperinflation exploded. People carried salaries in wheelbarrows. It took millions to buy a loaf of bread. Some families burned money for heat because paper currency was no longer worth more than firewood. But here's the fascinating part. People who owned gold protected their wealth. Because during the crisis, gold did not magically become more valuable. The currency simply died. And once people realized that, they returned to real value. This is where the true power of gold appears. Gold is not only economic, it is psychological. Because during crises, humans search for a sense of control, and they turn toward physical things. That's why during major collapses, people buy gold, buy silver, buy land, stockpile food. Because once crisis begins, people stop thinking about growth. They think about survival. The strength of gold comes more from psychology than economics. Because humans do not see gold as just metal. They see it as security. Empires changed. Flags changed. Religions changed. Paper currencies disappeared, but gold remained. That's why humanity keeps returning to the same place during every crisis, because the human mind has not changed. Fear has not changed. Uncertainty has not changed. But the modern rise of gold is not limited to ancient empires. In 1971, the world changed forever. The United States removed the dollar from the gold standard. This became known as the Nixon shock. Before that moment, the dollar was technically connected to gold. Countries could exchange dollars for physical gold. But America's war spending was exploding. The Vietnam War was expensive. Debt was growing. And the United States realized the system was becoming unsustainable. Eventually, the dollar became a completely paper-based system. This meant the modern financial world was no longer backed by physical value, but almost entirely by trust. And that was historic, because for the first time in history, the world's reserve currency became almost completely psychological. In reality, the entire modern economy operates on belief. Is your money actually sitting inside the bank? Usually not. Modern banks can digitally create far more money than they physically hold, and the system works. Because people do not all panic at the same time. But when crisis begins, everything changes again. We saw this during the 2008 financial crisis. When Lehman Brothers collapsed, the world was shocked, because for the first time, people realized the modern financial system might actually be fragile. Giant banks were failing. Companies were collapsing. People rushed to withdraw cash from ATMs. And once again, the same thing happened. Gold started rising because people were no longer searching for profit. They were searching for trust. And every time gold rises during history, it tells the same story. People stopped trusting the system. We saw the same psychology during COVID. In 2020, the world suddenly stopped. Store shelves emptied. Supply chains broke. People panicked. And once again, gold rose. Because human psychology has not changed for thousands of years. When uncertainty begins, people search for physical safety. In fact, this is why even the most powerful nations on earth still hold massive gold reserves. The United States, China, Russia, European central banks. They all continue storing enormous amounts of gold. And the reason is simple. Even the most advanced financial system still depends on trust. And once trust breaks, gold returns. But perhaps the most interesting question is this: why gold specifically? Why not something else? Because gold occupies a unique place in human history. It does not rust. It does not disappear easily. It is rare. It cannot simply be created. And for thousands of years, it has been universally accepted as valuable. Humans do not see gold as just a metal. They see it as a universal language of trust. Rome trusted gold. The Ottomans trusted gold. The British trusted gold. Modern central banks still trust gold because throughout history, paper currencies died. Empires collapsed, but gold survived. And there's another interesting detail. Gold usually does not rise before a crisis begins. It rises after the begins. Panic starts. Because humans are slow to recognize danger, people naturally want to believe the system is stable, because security feels comfortable. But once panic begins, behavior changes instantly and massive. Wealth transfers often happen during these exact moments. Prepared people see opportunity inside fear. Everyone else reacts emotionally. That's why crises throughout history transformed not only economies, but societies themselves. The collapse of Rome changed human behavior. Weimar Germany changed how people viewed money. 2008 showed the world that banks were not invincible. And even today, the world still fears the banks' same things. Inflation, debt, bank crises, money printing. And this is why people continue asking the same question: what can we actually trust? Maybe this is the true power of gold, because gold is not really an investment. It is an escape plan. People hope everything will survive, but a part of them still wants something safe to hold. And for thousands of years, that safe thing has usually been gold. In fact, many of history's wealthiest families and institutions behaved the same way. During crises, banking dynasties, empires, and central banks continued accumulating gold because powerful people understood one simple truth. Paper systems can change, but physical value survives. That's why families hid jewelry during wars. That's why people buried gold underground. That's why refugees carried gold across borders. Because during crises, people trust what they can physically hold. And maybe that is gold's greatest strength. It is not digital. It is not just numbers on a screen. It is not an app. It is something real. And human psychology always moves toward what feels real during fear. Maybe that's why gold never truly died. Technology changed. Empires changed. Financial systems changed. But human fear never changed. And the history of gold is really the history of human fear. Because before humans want to become rich, they first want to feel safe. And when crisis begins, humanity always returns to the same thing, not the system. Real value. Gold.